A very warm welcome to all my students and viewers. This is the Bishop's Heritage School, Patna, and this is assignment number 4 for class 9, and the subject is literature in English. We'll be doing the prose Hearts and Hands by O. Henry today. Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. Now, before we begin the prose Hearts and Hands, let us get to know a bit about the author. William Sidney Porter, reputed as O. Henry, was born on 11th of September 1862. He was an American writer whose short stories are known for wit, wordplay, and unexpected endings. He was born in Greensboro, North Carolina. His father, Allen Sidney Porter, was a medical doctor. His mother died when he was only 3 years old. He left school at the age of 15 and then held a number of jobs, including a bank clerk. He was accused of misappropriation of funds by the bank and later sent to prison. In the prison, he began writing short stories to support his daughter, as his wife had died. Here, to hide his identity, he used a pseudonym, the pseudonym of O. Henry, a kind of name that authors do use, also known as pen names. After release, he moved to New York in 1902 and wrote one story every week for the New York World and for other publishers. His first collection of stories was Cabbages and Kings, 1904. The next collection, The 4 Million, 1906, included his well. Known stories The Gift of Magi, The Skylar's Room, and The Green Door are very famous indeed. One of his last stories, The Ransom of the Red Chief, 1910, is the best known of his stories. In his lifetime, O. Henry was able to see the silent film adaptation of his stories, like The Sacrifice, 1909, Trying to Get Arrested, 1909, and others. These successes brought with it attendant pressures, and he became an alcoholic. On 5th of June 1910, he died of several complications like cirrhosis of the liver, enlarged heart, etc. The title Hearts and Hands deals with the emotional attachment of a young pretty girl to a handsome counterfeiter who was being taken to the prison as Leavenworth for 7 years for counterfeiting. When she met him in the train with the marshal, she was shocked to see him handcuffed to the marshal. But the marshal, immediately realizing the situation, let his heart take control of the situation and save her from further shock. He immediately told her that he was the convict and the other man was the real marshal, and he was being taken to the prison for counterfeiting or forgery. Thus the title is very apt, as it is the unexpected kindness in the heart of the marshal which emerges to save the humiliation of the hands which were handcuffed. Now, before I start paraphrasing of the story Hearts and Hands, let me give you a brief summary of the story. This short story, set on a train in Denver, revolves around 3 main characters and 2 minor characters who reveal the truth of the story at the end. As is the celebrated manner of the author, this short story also surprises us with its unexpected ending. Miss Fairchild, an attractive young woman and dressed stylishly, seated on the train when 2 men board the train and take them to seat opposite her. Seeing them, she recognizes one of them, the handsome younger man, as Mr. Easton. Exuding all sweetness and love, she addresses and admonishes him for not recognizing her. At the sound of her voice, he raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet or the handcuff, to the left one of his companion. Seeing Easton's embarrassment at the horror of the young woman on seeing the handcuffs, the other glum-faced man offered an explanation, saying that Easton was the marshal and the 2 were heading at Leavenworth prison, as he had been convicted for 7 years for counterfeiting or cheating or forgery. Easton, then taking the cue, informs him that he had to do something, and when he saw the opening, he just took it. When the girl continued to stare at the handcuffs, he tried to put her at ease by saying that all marshals handcuff themselves to their prisoners to prevent them from getting away. The glum-faced man then told him that he needed a drink and hadn't smoked the whole day, so he should take him to the smoker room now. Both of them then got up to go to the smoker room, and Mr. Easton held out his hand for a farewell. As they went down the aisle or the passage of the train to the smoker room, one of the passengers in a seat nearby, who had heard most of the conversation, remarked to the other that the marshal was a good chap, and the other replied that he was pretty young for a marshal. The first speaker then opens her eyes to the reality of the situation by saying that an officer never handcuffed a prisoner to the right hand. We then realize who was the real marshal and who was the prisoner. We then appreciate the magnanimity of the actual glum-faced marshal, who wanted to spare Mr. Easton further embarrassment and the lady further horror by reversing the roles. The master storyteller, O. Henry's, none of his stories fail to take our breaths away through their absolutely surprise twists at the end. Hearts and Hands is no exception. Though a simple and lucid language the story is full of, the author has narrated the story of 3 characters who form the crux of the story. He has depicted three characters, that is, a criminal, a marshal, and a young lady who was well acquainted with the criminal in his earlier days. But she meets him in the train under totally unfavorable circumstances in which all her impressions about this handsome young man could have been dashed to the ground and she could have branded him a criminal all his life. But his honor remains intact and her embarrassment disappears when she learns from the other man that her friend was the marshal who was taking him to prison as he was convicted of 7 years in jail for cheating or forgery or counterfeiting. This creates an ironical situation which is only cleared by two other passengers who have seen the whole thing. One of them mentions that the young man was really a good sort of chap, to which the other one asks him if he never knew an officer to handcuff a prisoner to the right hand. Thus the truth is revealed. In many of his stories, O. Henry holds the universal romanticized wish that people are basically good and unselfish. This wish is highlighted in the story Hearts and Hands. In fact, the very little points in the story are also the titular points to the reality that in times of need, it is the heart that is displayed over everything else. In the story, we find two men sitting opposite to a pretty young lady in the train which was heading to Denver. She recognized Mr. Easton, but as he was a criminal and being taken to a prison at Leavenworth, he was handcuffed to the officer. So he could not put out his right hand and instead offering his left hand for her to shake. He explained that as his right hand was engaged, then he could not offer it. Seeing this dicey situation, the other man comes to the rescue and saves Mr. Easton's day from embarrassment. So this is the kind of surprise ending, which is typical of O. Henry. We will also get to see this kind of surprise ending in stories like A Face on the Wall, After 20 Years, as well as Gift of Magi. Now we'll be doing the paraphrasing of the entire story, Hearts and Hands. Hearts and Hands by O. Henry. So let's begin the story now. At Denver, there was an influx of passengers into the coaches on the eastbound B&M Express. So the story is set at Denver. Denver is the capital of Colorado. It's an American metropolitan city. So as we get to see that there was a train, it was about to leave the platform of Denver, and there was an influx of passengers. There was an entry of large number of people in the coach. In one of the bogie or the coach, there sat a very pretty young woman dressed in elegant taste. She was dressed very stylishly, graceful way. And she was surrounded by all the luxurious comforts of an experienced traveler. Maybe she had a jar of water, she had a flux of coffee, and she had everything that an experienced traveler carries along with him or her. Among the newcomers, among the new passengers who entered there was a young man of handsome presence with a bold, frank countenance. He was looking very bold, smart. He had a very cheerful face. Countenance means face, and mannerism. The other one who was accompanying him was a ruffled, was looking disorderly, glum-faced person. He was looking sad and moody, heavily built. He was very heavy and roughly dressed. He was dressed in a very rough and tough way. The two were handcuffed together. That means one of them was a criminal, the other one was a cop. Let's see who was what. As they passed down the aisle of the coach, A-I-S-L-E is pronounced as aisle. It means a passage of the coach. The only vacant seat offered was a reversed one facing the attractive young woman. So there was only one seat that was empty, that was just opposite the beautiful young woman. Here the linked couple means both the couple, talking about the glum-faced man and the handsome-looking man. They were linked together, they were attached together. The young woman's glance fell upon them with a distant, swift disinterest. She was looking towards them, but she didn't want to show that she was interested in them. Women do behave like that, If they are checking a man out, they do not show their interest, do not make their interest that obvious. Then with a lovely smile, brightening her countenance, then she sported a beautiful, lovely smile, and her entire face lit up, brightened up. Countenance, as I said, means face. And a tender pink tinging her rounded cheeks. Her cheeks became pinkish. She was blushing a bit. She was feeling a bit shy as well. She held out a little grey-gloved hand. She held her hand out. She was wearing a grey color glove. When she spoke, her voice was very sweet, and deliberate proclaimed that its owner was accustomed to speak and be heard. And she spoke in such a way that it made it obvious that she wanted to be heard. Well, Mr. Easton, if you'll make me speak first, I suppose I must. Don't you ever recognize old friends when you meet them in the West? Mr. Easton, she was referring to that man who had a frank countenance. And she said, do people in the western part of America, they do not recognize old friends or acquaintances? What's wrong with you? The younger man roused himself sharply. He got alarmed and he reacted sharply at the sound of her voice, seemed to struggle with a slight embarrassment. He was slightly embarrassed. He was feeling a bit awkward. He was feeling oddly placed because he was handcuffed, which he threw off instantly. Then suddenly he threw off his feeling of embarrassment and then clasped her fingers, held her hand and her fingers, "It's Miss Fairchild," he said with a smile. "You're Miss Fairchild." So we come to know the name of the beautiful lady was Miss Fairchild. I'll ask you to excuse the other hand. Please excuse my other hand because I just put forward my left hand to shake hands with you because I'm handcuffed on the other hand. It's otherwise engaged just at present. My other hand is just engaged at the present moment. He slightly raised his right hand, bound at the wrist by the shining bracelet to the left one of his companion, who was the glum-faced man. Now his left hand was free, so he put forward his left hand to shake the hand of Miss Fairchild, but his right hand was attached to the left one of his companion. Handcuff has been referred here as shining bracelet. Bracelet means a piece of jewelry that is worn around the wrist. The glad look in the girl's eyes slowly changed to a bewildered horror. She was very happy to come across Mr. Easton, who might have been in all probability her former lover. But suddenly when she saw he was handcuffed, she was horrified. The glow faded from her cheeks were blushing, she was turned pinkish, but the glow disappeared, zip zap zoom. Her lips parted in a vague means uncertain, relaxing distress. She gaped her mouth. The upper lip was parted from the lower lip because she was uncertain about the prospects of Mr. Easton at that present point of time. Easton, with a little laugh, just to save the situation, as if amused, was about to speak again when the other four stalled him. Other one stopped him. The glum-faced man stopped him. The glum-faced man had been watching the girl's countenance, meaning face, with veiled glances. He was looking towards the girl, but he was covering his face with his hand. He was slyly looking towards the girl from his skin, where he was very interested in observing what was going on, talking about the conversation and interaction between Mr. Easton and Miss Fairchild. And he was observing with a very interested way, keen way, with his shrewd eyes. Shrewd means a person who is a sharp observer of something that is going on. A person who's got a sharp power of judgment. "You'll excuse me for speaking, miss," he says, "but I see you are acquainted, you are familiar, accustomed with the marshal here. If you'll ask him to speak a word for me when we get to the pen, he will do it, and it will make things easier for me there." He says that as I can see you are familiar, you are acquainted with Mr. Easton. Why don't you ask him to put forward a good word for me when I go to the prison pen? And I think he will do that. So in this statement, he makes it clear that he was the prisoner, he was the convict, and Mr. Easton was the cop, and therefore they were handcuffed together. "He's taking me to Leavenworth prison. Mr. Easton is taking me to Leavenworth prison. Why don't you tell him, request him to put in a good word for me? It's 7 years for counterfeiting. I've got a sentence to serve 7 years for forgery, for duplicating things, for cheating, for counterfeiting." "Oh," said the girl with a deep breath and returning color. Her colors came back. She came back to her normal self. Remember, her cheeks turned pink when she came across Mr. Easton, but suddenly the color disappeared after seeing that her former lover was handcuffed. But she was coming back to her normal self now. "So that is what you're doing out here, Marshal? So that's what you're doing out in the West in America, Mr. Easton? You've become a marshal? You've become a cop?" "My dear Miss Fairchild," said Easton calmly, "I had to do something. Money has a way of taking wings into itself, and you know it makes money to keep step with our crowd in Washington. I had to do something. I couldn't have been stagnant in terms of finance like that. I had to work. You know, money is like a bird which can fly away at any point of time. How much you want to preserve money, money will always be spent. It's got a way of taking wings into itself, and to keep pace with the crowd in Washington, you require hard cash. I saw this opening, I saw this vacancy in the West, and well, a marshalship is in quite as high a position as that of ambassador." He said, "I've become a marshal, but my position is not as high as that of an ambassador." He suddenly refers to an ambassador. Maybe there was someone in the girl's life who was an ambassador who Mr. Easton was jealous of. Maybe he was one of her former lovers. The ambassador, you know, a representative of a country settling in another country. "The ambassador," said the girl warmly, "doesn't call anymore. He needn't ever have done so." "The ambassador," said the girl, "doesn't call anymore. He need not ever have done so." From the young lady's agitated reply, we can speculate that the ambassador may have been a former suitor, former lover of the girl, who wanted the hands of the girl in terms of marriage, who disappointed her in some way. And she reacts like this: he did not ever have done so. The ambassador was never a strong contender for her love, we can make out from this statement of hers. "You ought to know, you should know that." She's telling him, "You should know my love status. I'm not with that ambassador anymore. And so now you are one of these dashing Western heroes. You have become a cowboy. You have become a cowboy. You're a Western hero. You are riding and shooting, and you are encountering all kind of dangers, eh? That's different from the Washington life. You have been missed from the old crowd. Your old peers, friends are missing you a lot. The girl's eyes, fascinated, went back as if she traveled back in time. Her heart was brimming with romance and love. She wanted to be with Mr. Easton. Don't you worry about them, miss, said the other man. Don't you worry about the criminals and all these things. The glum-faced man wanted to say, because she suddenly looked towards the handcuffs. All marshals handcuff themselves to the prisoners to keep them from getting away. Don't you worry about the handcuff. The handcuff is there so that I do not run away or escape from Mr. Easton. Mr. Easton knows his business. He's a cop. He knows his job very well. Will we see you again soon in Washington? Asked the girl. She was dropping hints that she wanted to be with Mr. Easton. Not soon, I think, said Easton. My butterfly days are over, I fear. My butterfly days are over. I'm not free anymore. First hint. What hint? Well, I'll tell you that towards the end of the story. I love the West, said the girl irrelevantly. She was talking about some topic that was not relevant at that point of time. Her eyes were shining softly. Her eyes were shining. She was on cloud nine. She was diving in the depth of ocean of love. She looked away out of the car window and started visualizing herself with Mr. Easton. She began to speak truly and simply without the gloss of style and manner. She was not putting on that style and accent of hers anymore. Mama and I spent the summer in Denver. My mother and myself, we spent the summer in Denver. She went home a week ago because father was slightly ill. She has left now. I could live and be happy in the West. I could live and be happy here. She was dropping hint to him that if you want, I can be your wife and be your girlfriend, your fiancée, and I can be with you. I think the air here agrees with me. I think the ambience, the environment really suits me here. Money is not everything. I'm not after money. But people always misunderstand things and remain stupid. People always misunderstand things. People think that I'm always after money. People think women that love money only. No, it's all a matter of heart. Say, Mr. Marshall, growled the glum-faced man, this isn't quite fair. I'm needing a drink. Now, glum-faced man wanted to cut the conversation short, so he said, I want to have a drink. I want to consume some alcohol. I want to have some beer or wine. And I haven't had a smoke all day. I didn't have a smoke. I want some tobacco as well. Haven't you talked long enough? You have struck a long conversation with the lady. Take me the smoker now. There used to be smoker zones and trains in America. They still have now. Want you? I'm half dead for a pipe. I want to have a pipe. You know, in olden era and bygone days, they used to smoke pipe. It looks like a microscopic sitar. You put some tobacco there and have a gala smoke. Although smoking is injurious to ourselves, it's not good. The bound travelers rose to their feet. They got up from there. Easton with the same slow smile on his face. Easton was small, sporting a smile on his face. We'll be continuing. I can't deny a petition for tobacco, Mr. Easton replied. He said lightly, it's the one friend of the unfortunate. Cigarette smoke always accompanies a man full of tragedy. This is a kind of belief. Goodbye, Miss Fairchild. Duty calls, you know. I have to accompany my prisoner and the convict there. He held out his hand for a farewell, a goodbye. It's too bad you're not going east, she said. It's very bad you're not going with me to the eastern part of America, she said, reclothing herself with manner and style. Again, she was speaking in manner and style. In between, she became her normal self. Again, her pompous self was back. But you must go on to Leavenworth, I suppose, but you have to go to prison, I guess. Yes, said Easton. I must go to Leavenworth. The two men sidled down the aisle into the smoker. They walked together side by side into the smoking zone. The two passengers in a seat nearby. Now, there were two fellow passengers. They were sitting in a seat nearby. They were eavesdropping. They were overhearing conversation between Mr. Easton, the marshal, and the beautiful lady, Miss Fairchild. Said one of them, that Marshall is a good sort of chap. Some of these Western fellows are all right. That Marshall is a good one. He was referring to Mr. Easton as the cop. Pretty young to hold an office like that, isn't he? Asked the other. He's a young fellow, you know. First one was referring to the marshal, the real marshal, that I'll come to in the last line. And the other one thought he was talking about Mr. Easton. Therefore, he said, a very young chap to become a cop. Young? Exclaimed the first speaker. Why, oh, didn't you catch on? What's wrong with you? Didn't you understand? Did you ever know an officer to handcuff a prisoner to his right hand? You think Mr. Easton, that young fellow who's the cop, he was handcuffed with the prisoner with his right hand. Have you ever seen a police officer who is attached to the prisoner with handcuff on his right hand? So this is the final twist. This is what O. Henry is all about. Now the final twist is revealed that the real marshal was the glum-faced man and not Mr. Easton. He was trying to save the day for Mr. Easton. This man had obviously observed keenly what had been occurring and understood who was the real convict and who was the actual marshal. He realized how compassionate the real marshal was as he assumed a reversal of roles to save the young girl and Mr. Easton humiliation and embarrassment. He corrected the impression of the other speaker by asking him whether any officer handcuffed a prisoner to his right hand. So this is the final twist that was portrayed by O. Henry, as he specialized in ending all of his stories in a kind of, he gives a kind of surprise ending. The real marshal is the most important person in this story, as it is through his heart a potentially embarrassing situation is averted. When the marshal entered the train at Denver with the convict handcuffed to him, they took a seat opposite Miss Fairchild, and he saved the day for Mr. Easton by pretending to be the convict. So this is the story all about. And this is the speciality of O. Henry. You must go through some stories of his, like After 20 Years, A Face on the Wall is a beautiful story, and I'm sure you must have read the story Gift of Magi.